Being downtown, I've had my studio here in the building for a while, and I used to always park in the alley back behind. And people in the building and around know what I do, so quite often I'd have gifts left for me in the truck. And the pulleys in this piece are an example of that. These are actually the pulleys from the elevator in this building. And when they were replaced, it's 100 years old this year, so they're likely 100-year-old pulleys. But when they were replaced, they put them in the back of my truck. And so they became kind of the dressing. This is an old craftsman work table. And a broken mannequin that, obviously the broken part of it kind of became a feature of it, that I've dressed up. Her name is Pearl, and her heart is actually a box that opens, and there's a pearl within. So that's how she got her name. I like the fact that a lens can be used to focus on something, and also be used to obscure that. It can look like a focal point, but by being out of focus, you can kind of deny that. And I like, especially working in these box ones, I like having a different depth in there, a different depth of field. So I'm just drawn to using lenses in that way. This is an Astral projector, just because I like the sound of that. People talk about astral projection, this is how that's achieved. It's basically a lamp, but again, a stack of lenses, and kind of a cool thing, a happy accident that came about with this. I was leaving the studio and had left it on, and just accidentally. I turned off every other light, and with this being the only light on in a completely dark room, it actually projected a rainbow about 35 feet away, maybe 5 or 6 inches, and not just a spectrum, but actually a curved arched rainbow. So it is, in addition to being a lamp, also a rainbow projector. So this piece is called Stop, and it's indicative of something that kind of shows up in a lot of my work. I use a lot of old picture frames in my work, and when I do, I always turn them around. So I take the glass out, put the glass on the front, and flip the frame around, because I think there's enough of that decorative gilt type framing, and I like seeing the evidence of its being made, the staples and paper and fingerprints and things like that. So I call these Leatherby lamps, like Let There Be, Leatherby lights. And this one is an old typewriter case for a portable typewriter. And I use plumbing parts and different, some old projection parts, but a lot of it is other things just being used in that context. So like this surround is actually from a deadbolt lock, part of an old magnifying glass, and some other kitchen spouts and things like that. But together, using a lamp, it gives a really neat light. These with the lights on the side are good in a small, like a narrow hallway or something like that, where it will create these random spotlights on the side. So this piece is called Rosie, and it came about, I've always had a collection of all kinds of small things, lenses and camera parts and things like that. And then a friend was holding an estate sale, and I got this figure. It's a dress form, but being able to expand it out to its largest size created this cavity within. So I just took a lot of my lenses and other parts that I already had and kind of dressed it out. The arms here are both a couple of old table lamps. This is actually a projector lens. This is the focusing lens or a filter from a camera. And inside is an old electric radiator heater. Some folks have asked or make reference to steampunk when addressing my work, and this is probably the steampunkiest thing I've made. It fits within that genre. I don't consider what I do steampunk, but definitely the journey I'm on has intersected with that. This is the second iteration of the Jangalodian, like a Nickelodeon, but with more noise. The first one, basically, I just wanted the working parts of an upright piano. I love the hammers and levers and all the wood workings of a piano. So I got one and stripped it down and was ready to leave it out on the curb, just this big bench with a harp in it, and I started tossing things at it and playing with it while I was in my studio. And it just became a lot of fun. And so the first one I did was meant to be played by 8 people at once. It had no keys, no hammers, but a lot of different ways to interact with the strings. This one obviously has a lot of the keys and hammers, so it has a lot of the musicality left, but here where the keys have been removed due to an injury, it fell off a truck, I chose to put an accordion there just because it fits so nicely and because it's also musical. Having keys, it just seemed like it belonged there. Although the keys are gone on the piano, the strings are still here. So this is meant to be interacted with coins. So you can drop a coin in here, point it at whatever string that you want to play. I keep a bowl of coins handy just for that. But even so, even though the keys are gone, the notes remain. And I've added other things in behind for the keys to fall into and jangle and make noise. I'm here in the Spring Arts Tower. I've had my shop here for several years, and when the bookstore moved in, I approached Josh, the owner, and asked him if I could put in some installation pieces in here. So this is one of them. This is a 100-year-old harp case. It's full of old Reader's Digest condensed books, and these were the books I grew up with. These were from my folks' house. But I just love the nature of a harp case. It's all dimensions and directions. It basically has just one right angle in the whole thing. And so putting it kind of cattywampus, it has a neat kind of a dancing movement to it. So this piece is called Our Lady, the Queen of Angels. It kind of is a gorilla piece. I did it on LA's birthday and put it up overnight. So when everybody came in first thing in the morning, it would be there. I had pictured doing a skyscape, a skyline of downtown, which is a difficult thing to do because in silhouette it's not as representative as some skylines. So as I was driving around town thinking of that, I looked at the City Hall building, which of course is really iconic for LA. I made the model of City Hall in here, and that's basically the heart and soul of this piece is City Hall. This is actually a whistle given to me by Matt James Metzen. I was up on the 8th floor in the studio and was looking for a new space to just get a little more daylight, a little closer to the corner here. And the owner of the building showed me this space just when he was doing the door. It had been part of another space, so he was just framing it in. And knowing it had this little recess that I could create depth into and then open up cavities and stick things through, I just loved it. And so I just asked for the freedom and the permission to do whatever the hell I wanted here, and he granted it within that space. Because I'm working with old found objects and a lot of old wood stuff, all from the 30s and 40s, it all has a certain patina. My wife says my palette runs from rust to sepia, and that's very true. So when I do include color, I have to force myself to do it, and I basically include all colors at once, because rather than have a color theme, I just say, oh, it needs color. So this is actually melted crayon inside of some old perfume bottles. So this is the old Schulte United building. It's a 4-story building. It was built originally as a department store, and it had been through many different iterations. So this whole space just had all these weird angles and things sticking out of it. And I wanted something that could kind of tie all that in together and make it more smooth and more organic. So I used this linear, kind of like a pipe organ type look with 2x4s. And then the curved lines are 2 sine waves that are interacting. Here they're just kind of riding on top of each other. In other areas they actually crisscross and intersect. But that way, as you climb up through the building, this kind of curved line follows along with you. So it helps break up all that angularity and make it all one big space. This is an old vintage camera that I'm making just as a freestanding piece. So I've expanded the back, and it's going to have a little environment inside, probably including an old photo or two. So a lot of my work is inspired just by the materials at hand. So quite often I'll just pick a bin and start pulling some things together. And as I put them together, if they start to look like something, then I'll pursue that. So I've got bins of just things like louvers. I'll take an old shutter and pull all the louvers out of it. And then I have these nice evenly spaced pieces of wood, already painted, already trimmed to some extent, that I can build things out of. So I've used these in many kinds of different pieces. And then even after I've used them, obviously these were cut off from something else, but these will then become part of something. Some of these, like this one, are named Wordneys. That's my grandfather's middle name. So everything in there is stuff that was left to me from him, and the bin below as well. So some of these are some of my more precious goodies. just because I've had them from a long time and they came from a special place. So like here I've got some old dominoes and pipe fittings and just parts of things, an old plumb bob. I don't use it much, but I smile every time I pull it out. This was a 50th birthday present from artist Patrick Gothard. He gave me all his bottle caps from his Corona Extras, so I sometimes leaf through here. As you can see on my shelf here, they've made it as the trim on my workbench, but I use them occasionally in my work as well. I use a lot of old tins just to keep parts and things in. But then I also will sometimes wrap them in newspaper and put them in the fireplace. So I get this instant antique box that I can then use in my work. I often use them to keep parts in as well, but I can use it as a little compartment in my work. This is basically a box used like a snorkel or a diving mask. You hold it so the surface is on the water and then you can look down inside. And I like the kind of television screen nature of it. So I took this old car jack and built a head on it at an angle so that this fits together and rests on that plane. I just love old machines, and even if I don't actually do anything with them, I just love them because of the way that they work and the tiny little lenses and functions on them. They're kind of an adjunct to my collection of old cases. I collect a lot of old black leatherette cases for my box lamps, and quite often I'll have a broken projector with a great case, and so I wind up just with an old broken projector. But they're great, just as sculptures. They're beautiful old pieces of machinery. This is kind of all my tools for clay work mostly. A lot of wood tools, chopsticks that work great because you can draw double lines and adjust the size. This is a handy clay tool. But I like these old kind of carafes that I made for it. And then these are all my hole saws for cutting the holes in the boxes. And then I'll put my lenses in and turn them into lamps. But I just like having everything in hand. So this is a line of pottery that I started when I moved here to Pasadena. We're in an old craftsman home, and so I wanted to kind of riff on the arts and crafts style of pottery. So that's what these are. I have a waxy glazed finish, kind of like the old Batchelder tiles. And these are kind of playing off this existing design I was doing in Raku, but bringing it more into an arts and crafts flavor. This is all my molding that I use for making my frames and doing my box pieces. I've got old pieces of tent stake and lengths of tape measure and all kinds of just anything long and linear. This is where I go to get it. And quite often I'll have something that just is of a certain dimension and I can just dive through and go, oh, that right there is the perfect thing I'm looking for. This is a big old rebar stake that I drilled into the stone here and then added some of my Raku pictures on top and stacked with gears in between because they're all kind of a gear motif on the pictures.